Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Bande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Mochi Beda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shachi 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 Om. Namaste everyone. Welcome to our Drg Drsya-Viveka class. So last Thursday we saw the relationship between those seers or illuminators. So we have the seers or the illuminators, and somehow in which way they relate to one another. We have established that there is no real relationship from the mind or the intellect with consciousness, but below the line of the mind or the intellect, there is a relationship with the denser seers, the denser aspects of our body-mind complex that altogether as one single organism produce the phenomenon of experience and knowledge, the knower and the object of knowledge, and the knowledge gained through that. So the experience and so on. So we have this triad. It comes through from the first seer, the first illuminator, the absolute free limitless consciousness. It does not relate to any of the other seers, but the other seers, they relate to one another as if they transfer existence and consciousness. In this analysis of the Drg Drsya, we are looking into Chit, into consciousness as the seer, the illuminator. So besides that, with the exception of consciousness, there are others, they transfer and they have a certain relationship. And we have been analyzing their relationship, and there is a certain purpose to understand in which way these relative seers or illuminators, they relate to one another, and in which way what we are, our true nature as consciousness, existence, does not relate to any of this, okay? And then we saw that if there is a relationship, it could be said to be a relationship based on delusion, because consciousness, what we are, does not, we are, as we say, we are not only attributeless, but associationless, okay? We don't associate with anything. We just, by our mere presence, and then this existence, which is inherent in myself as Brahman, is transferred to the body-mind complex. And then it appears as if this aspect of the instrument of knowledge, that aspect, until we see the instrument of knowledge experience as the instruments, the five sense instruments, the eyes, the ears. So it seems to be the knower. Every one of these aspects of the body-mind construct builds around itself a sense of individuality, a sense of personality, a sense of I. I, this, I, this, I. So I relate to the body-mind construct, and I draw a certain different levels of identities based on these relative seers. So we want to analyze the relationships, the no relationship with what we really are, because once we have this knowledge, we can avoid a lot of confusion and a lot of suffering, okay? Let's go back here. Why we should know the nature of these relationships? The author says that we have to learn this nature because the knowledge gives us appropriate attitude towards them. With the appropriate attitude, we handle these relationships without getting confused. Greater understanding leads to better handling and a happier life. Right? Knowledge is power. Knowledge is going to give us confidence to handle life properly. So, and what is this knowledge? So it's the knowledge not only about my nature as the absolute seer / illuminator, but the knowledge about my secondary nature and the way somehow I get confused with the instrument of knowledge experience, okay? So we have an instrument. Every time we have an instrument, we know clearly if it is a physical instrument, whatsoever it is, we don't get confused with the instrument, even though sometimes people get confused with the pair of glass. You know, they say, no, this is an integral part of my physical body now. You know? But in general, we can objectify an instrument. But when it comes to the body-mind complex, the instrument, our primary instrument of knowledge experience, it's very easy for us to get confused, to get identified. And if we identify with that which is relative, which is an appearance, okay? And it's always changing and it's bound by time and it's limited by all means. So if we identify with those aspects of my secondary nature, I'm going to have trouble, I'm going to suffer, okay? And I'm not going to know how to handle my life, let's say. I'm going to be confused and afraid, insecure. This knowledge is power. And which kind of knowledge this is? I am that which never changes, not subject to time, not subject to modification, okay? And then we just, a short summary, we know that when we analyze the relationship between Chidabhasa, which is reflect consciousness, and the subtle body, yeah, written, present here as the mind, okay? We have Chidabhasa, which is by definition reflected consciousness, and we have the mind, which is the reflecting medium. So when we look into the relationship, in which way they are bound, okay? And then we see that the boundary between them lasts as long as they exist. The relationship is not eternal because in Videhamukha, the mind gets destroyed. So as long as there is the subtle body, okay, there will be a reflection. We know it's all the time there. You cannot have a reflection without a reflecting medium. Consciousness is all pervasive, but it's somehow every time it touches a reflecting medium, it just shows itself as the individual Atma, okay? Jiva Atma. And then every time this happens, then we know they are inseparable, but it's a relationship. Although it is beginningless, it's not forever, okay? It has an end. And the end is with self-knowledge and moksha, which is presented here as the Videhamukti, okay? The mind gets destroyed, because otherwise the mind gets back, it loses the reflecting medium, or the mind is the reflecting medium, it loses the physical instrument of experience knowledge, but it immediately starts to work to construct another one, okay? And how the individual soul builds another physical instrument of knowledge experience from our vasanas, our likes and dislikes, our desires for continuation, desires for experience and knowledge. So it's that vasana load that somehow under the light of knowledge of pure Sattva, of the Lord Ishvara, is going to bring about, in association with the Lord, a new birth, a new instrument, which is custom designed for the same subtle body carry on its process of what? Of learning, growing, evolving, elevating, until we can finally be tired of the game and just say, okay, that was enough. Last one. Since the mind, the body-mind connection is due to karma, the relationship will continue as long as Prarabdha karma left. So the subtle body, yeah, and the physical body, they have a connection there. It is karma, and the karma is going to create a new body, a new body, a new body, and it will continue as long as there is prarabdha karma. But then there is a death. In every birth, there is a death, and death is said to be when the prarabdha karma gets exhausted, okay? The prarabdha karma controls both the doer and the experience, the two aspects of our personality, okay? The prarabdha karma is going to condition what? The way I'm going to respond and the way I will receive the karma, the way I receive the results of my response. Yeah? Understand this, we can have a proper attitude towards life. Even self-knowledge cannot remove the connection between the body and mind. It means to say, if tomorrow we have earned a firm and fast and hard and unforgettable self-knowledge, that is not going to destroy the connection between the mind, the subtle body, and the physical body. Why? The subtle body could say like, okay, now I know my true nature. My true nature is not down here in the physical realm. My true nature is in the absolute as consciousness, okay? So this mind, having this understanding, could say, okay, I'm not gonna go down there. It's potential trouble to deal with the physical material pratibhasika. So, and then the subtle body will say, hey, bye-bye, I'm out of here. I'm going to merge back into the ocean of Brahman. But now the Jivan Mukta, it cannot do that, okay? It's going to be there because that is a decision left for the Lord Ishwara, okay? Therefore, there is no way that the Jnani can say, I'm out of here. Even if a person becomes unable to contribute to life, he may still have to experience. Now, suppose a person can no longer do anything due to some physical conditions, is still going to experience its prarabdha karma. Understand this, we can have a proper attitude towards life. Even self-knowledge cannot remove the connection between the physical body and the subtle body. Ishwara is going to take care of that in due time. Knowledge gives a new perspective to this truth, so that our emotional reaction to pain, sorrow, is under control, is largely, extensively minimized, okay? Our reaction, a perspective to our emotional body, our emotional reaction, okay? And the pain and the sorrow. So one thing is pain, another thing is psychological suffering, as we know. Pain is caused by karma, prarabdha karma, but sorrow is caused by ignorance, okay? So Vedanta is all about knowledge, and the knowledge about the relative illuminators, the relative seers, the knowledge in respect to the body-mind construct is fundamental, is instrumental, okay? Because it's knowledge that's going to allow us to move our identification with these relative aspects of my human experience and accomplish and establish my identity in my absolute seer / illuminator. And then what happens to that? What happens below the line of myself as Satya, myself as the absolute seer, it's not going to affect me, Why? Because I have reestablished my identity where it truly belongs, okay? And then it's all sorrow comes down, diminished, because there is a firm establishment in Brahman as Brahman. And then if comes some pain, physical pain, if comes some mental, disturbance, it never is powerful, strong enough to create psychological suffering, okay? The real sorrows and griefs, they do not happen because immediately you only know that belongs to the body-mind complex, and I'm none of this. Therefore, sorrow is caused by ignorance. Ignorance in respect to all of this, everything that Vedanta teaches. If we are ignorant, we're going to experience pain and sorrow, which is caused by prarabdha karma. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita the one who is not affected by adversities, who is without yearning for pleasures, and is free from longing, fear, and anger, is said to be wise, whose knowledge is unshaken. So it's all about that. So now the question then here is how to make this knowledge unshaken. How about this question? How to make this knowledge unshaken? Meaning to say, not subject to forgetfulness, at the same time, not subject to uncertainties or doubts or suspiciousness or no, I can't believe it. I must be the body-mind complex and so on. So this knowledge needs to be unshaken, and what it takes to make this knowledge hard and fast, clear, and never subject to doubt or suspiciousness. So what is in there to make a person to shift from uncertainty of self-knowledge to certainty of self-knowledge? So do we have an idea between us here, since we are a small group?
I would imagine that the practice of discrimination, the constant practice of discrimination in the Didhyasana is necessary after sufficient Shravana and Manana.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah. So we need to remove the obstacles, right? The obstacles for this firm self-knowledge, conviction, certainty. Okay, the obstacles are different in nature. There are different levels of obstacles. Fundamentally, they are three. Yeah? We have the impurities of the mind that can be taken care properly with Karma Yoga. Okay, all those negative emotions. Karma Yoga is the most beautiful natural purifier. And then we have some impurities which are nicely taken care by Upasana Yoga, which is the mind that is dispersive, which is all the time extroverted and jumping here and there. The mind that is extroverted and jumping like that can never really get through this knowledge and hold it, because it's not focused. So Upasana is going to remove those obstacles. And then the last obstacle is the removal of these doubts, these suspicions, this residual ignorance that still prevents me from saying, no, now I have no doubt anymore. Okay, removal of doubts, and this comes with Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, the Yani Yoga of Vedanta. We have three yogas, by the way: Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Yani Yoga. So through these three yogas, we're going to take care of these three obstacles. The bound between consciousness and the subtle body will go with the knowledge that the mind and consciousness have never had associated or connect. The mind cannot touch consciousness. The mind can never really connect to consciousness. And Krishna describes that in the Bhagavad Gita, saying that the self can never be slain, burned, drowned, or dried. It is changeless, all-pervading, stable, immovable, and eternal. Okay, so there is no way that the self, conscious existence, okay, can be affected by anything of the world, anything of the instrument of knowledge of the world. Those conditions of the body-mind construct never get transferred to consciousness, because consciousness belongs to a different order in which there is no bridge. There is no way we can transfer things from Mithya to Satya, okay? So that's the self. Therefore, it cannot be burned, slain, drowned, dried, Nothing can affect what we are in truth. This discrimination between Atma and the mind must happen so that we can have this hard and fast self-knowledge. Even though the light and the hand are intimate together, whatever the conditions of the hand, those conditions cannot affect the light. Huh? So this is one of those nice examples, Vedantic examples. We have the light, the hand. The hand is illumined and revealed by the light, and we can do whatever we want to do with a hand. Make it dirt, make it hurt, or cut a finger. And none of that is going to impact the light. The light is just revealing, illuminating, revealing principle that does not get entangled or involved with what it illumines and reveals, because it belongs to a different order, okay? Or it belongs to the real order in which the apparent order is superimposed. And the real order, the non-dual order, the only real order, is never affected by this superimposition called mithya. Huh? And then Swami P goes here, extending beautifully his examples, and he says, if the mind, if the hand moves, it one may think like, oh, the light is moving. No, the light does not move. If the hand gets dirt, the light does not get dirt, okay? Similarly, whatever happens to the mind cannot affect consciousness. Knowledge consists in two parts. First, I have to separate the mind and consciousness. So I need to separate my jiva atma in its substantial nature as the subtle body, okay? And then chidabhasa, the reflected entity that occurs, in association with the subtle body. It is consciousness, but it is a reflected consciousness. We need to understand what is chidabhasa, what is the reflecting medium. And then I need to separate, meaning to say discriminate. I need to understand original consciousness, the reflecting medium, and the reflected entity called chidabhasa. And then once I understand them, and then I can isolate my true real nature identity as Sakshi Chaitanya and claim it clearly without doubt, okay? Without shakiness, without fear that maybe I'm tripping here, okay? Maybe Vedanta is something a little crazy. Maybe it's just a wishful thinking that maybe we can live in the world and somewhat be immune from the suffering of the world, okay? After I discriminate and separate, I should make this knowledge clear, hard and fast through nididhyasana. I am consciousness, and the body-mind construct is an incidental medium, temporary medium. And I enliven this body-mind complex, and somehow I do that, but I don't do anything. It's just in my mere presence, the body-mind complex gets enlivened by me. The existence, the operation, and even the destruction of the subtle body cannot disturb me. The existence, the operation, even the destruction of the body-mind complex, let's say, cannot disturb me. In sleep, the mind, the phenomenon called Jiva Atma is resolved, okay? It's resolved in the causal body. The subtle body resolves itself in the causal body in deep sleep. And the transactions end, duality ends, but I remain in my existence through deep sleep. And not only, I enjoy my existence in deep sleep. Who does not enjoy a good night of deep sleep? The mind and the transactions may end by I exist all through. This Sakshi Mano Viveka, this discrimination between consciousness and the mind, consciousness and the intellect, and the identification with Sakshi Chaitanya is what we call self-knowledge, the understanding of my true nature. And this understanding needs to be doubt-free or doubtless self-knowledge. In Dakshinamurti Stotra, this identification is described with this knowledge. The relationship between the mind and consciousness is resolved, is removed, or the confusion. The idea that there is a relationship, association, removal of this relationship, canceling this relationship is knowing that there is no relationship. Nicely put. Is there a relationship? No. So only the relative seers, the relative illuminators, they relate to one another, but there is no relationship between Manu and Sakshi, okay? Okay, now here we have an introduction again of, he did not quite finish the verse 9. And I'm not gonna go into this repetition because we don't want to get bored by this verse 9. Okay. But I can't resist. When the individual uses the word I, it can refer to any of these three seers, depending upon the context. And there is nothing wrong about that, provided in the background of our mind, the background of our knowledge, we know this is only instrumental, these identities, they are instrumental for my transactions in the world, okay? They have a certain value and necessity, but I know where my true nature, my true identity sits. So we use these different seers to establish our identity. Every individual consists in the true seer. In the three seers, one is absolute and the other two are relative. When the individual uses the word I, it can refer to one or another of these aspects of the body-mind, the body-mind complex, the instrument of knowledge. As far as the lay people are concerned, they do not know that Sakshi by itself, and therefore they generally use the word for the relative seers. So the common people, the people who did not have contact with this knowledge, this Vedantic knowledge, use this relative seer, the I, in respect to one of these bodies, and we can go into the mystical words or esoteric words in which there are many lokas and different instruments of knowledge. So people can identify with any one of these and believe that that is the freedom, that is the ultimate, that is the true meaning of I. But the true meaning of I is not connected to any entity of experience, okay? There is no entity experience when we really establish ourselves as the true I, but there is such a confusion between these relative seers, even on different lokas, that people, they don't want to give up. They want to know the truth, but they still want to be an experiencing entity. Okay, this is the trouble we find everywhere. Thus, the word I can refer to any of these seers. These three seers cannot be physically separated, and it requires deep inquiry. Only with the help of the scriptures, supported by the teacher, we come to know the three seers, and most important, we come to understand better the body-mind construct as the instrument of knowledge and experience, and we get to understand that there is an invisible seer, invisible illuminator that I never imagined that were there, because I thought that the most subtle was the mind before. Most people believe that the most subtle is the mind. Is the I thought. So we need the scripture, no doubt about that. Without the scriptures, we are at lost. Having introduced the three seers, it was As we saw in the last class, consciousness, the original seer, need not be formed. Consciousness is not formed. The other seers, they get formed through this relationship between the relative seers. They just get formed as the energies are going to grossify to produce, until it produces the physical instruments of knowledge experience. It is a process of density, of densification of the body-mind complex until it becomes the physical instruments like the eyes, the ears, and so on. So, but Sakshi does not evolve. Sakshi does not get composed, does not get formed. It's free and independent, does not belong to the world of phenomenality, meaning to say changing, becoming, forming, etc. Okay, it does not function willfully in the form of any action. Consciousness does not have any willful desire, any desire for action. It happens just by its mere presence. And this Sakshi, this consciousness is transferring or blessing the other seer, the mind, with consciousness, with human consciousness, with reflected consciousness. The Chidabhasana, we know it is self-knowing, you know. It is self-reflective, you know. There is a certain consciousness that exists and knows, and we know that we are existence, and we know that we are knowledge. But we don't know that we are not the real source. We, as the body-mind complex, we are not the real source of this spike of consciousness. The real source of spike of consciousness belong to what I am in truth, which is not an experiencing agent, but it is free, limitless consciousness. If free, limitless consciousness would be an experiencing agent, it would be subject to the changing phenomena of media and would be no longer free from media. So we need to understand the impossibility of being an experiencing entity in the absolute or in Brahman as Brahman. This is all nonsense, okay? Okay. There is a passage here which is very, very nicely as well. Another example of Swampi. When I stand in front of a mirror, I lend my reflection to the mirror. So I stand in front of the mirror. Suppose that Lynn stands before the mirror, in front of the mirror. And then when she sees, she has produced a reflection in the mirror. How the hell did she do that? It probably takes a lot of skill to produce a reflection. And then after talking to Lynn, she said, no, I haven't done anything. I just want to look at myself. But I'm absolutely certain that I haven't done anything. So likewise, consciousness, without doing anything, it shines in all reflecting mediums without doing anything. So this is a nice angle of analogy. In my presence, the reflection is formed in the mirror. In the presence of consciousness, consciousness is reflected in all reflecting mediums as Jivatma. This is not an event in time. The mind with the reflected consciousness becomes the seer, relative seers. Without the Chidabhasa, the subtle body, without reflect consciousness, the subtle body can never be the seer. Why? Because the subtle body is inert energy, okay? And then who is the seer? Is it the subtle body? You remember these talks we have about the distinction between the reflecting medium and reflected consciousness, reflecting medium and reflect consciousness, RM and RC, okay? And the difference is that the reflecting medium is inert energy, inert matter, okay? And the reflected consciousness is what? Is consciousness, is the self, is consciousness, okay? Is it independent of the reflecting medium and independent of original consciousness? No. And yes. Yes is if the reflecting consciousness, the Chidabhasa, realize that fundamentally it is just consciousness. If it identifies with the sentient aspect of itself, which is I am, I exist, which is an aspect of consciousness, reflect by a medium, shining in a medium, reflecting medium. If it identifies with its true nature as consciousness, although it's reflect, although it still depends on the reflecting medium and original consciousness, but the Chidabhasa has the power to identify itself with its thought, with its conscious aspect, and not with its substantial aspect, meaning to say the subtle body, okay? Not with the thoughts appearing within the subtle body, but with the witnessing conscious principle experiencing the thoughts, okay? And then we can know that reflect consciousness equals original consciousness. This is not an event. Without Chidabhasa, the mind can never be the seer. Similar to the moon never being illuminated without sunlight. With the landing function of consciousness, consciousness lends existence consciousness. The mind becomes a seer. The seer mind is formed. It should be noted that this is not an event happening in time. Once the seer mind is formed, with borrowed consciousness was conceded, was lended to the mind chooses to bless the sense organs, including the sense instruments, okay? So it transfers this light of consciousness, which was, landed or conceded by Sakshi, Chaitanya, and then the mind is illuminated and it transfers exactly like the moon transfers the sunlight light, and then it transfers to the sense organs and transfers also to the sense instruments of knowledge, okay, the physical body. The physical body appears well and alive, and it shows, it appears that, okay, I am illuminating my environment. Okay, my environment is illumined by me because I'm the one perceiving it. But we know that there is a lot of transfers, station in which you take one train and then there is a transfer station and then you take another train. I lived some time in big cities like Tokyo, and sometimes we need to do several transfers. Okay. The physical body, the entire physical body is nothing, but it's the sense instruments required for the sense organs. The sense organs, they cannot really experience this pratibhasika without the sense instruments, okay? So this is to close you. Once the seer mind is formed with borrowed consciousness, the mind blesses the sense organs and the Golakan, which is the sense instrument. So the entire physical body is the instruments by which the sense organs can become a real Jivatma, a real experience entity. Without the physical instruments, without the Golakan, this subtle body, okay, this subtle body cannot really be experiencing knowing entity, okay, unless I don't know exactly anything about esotericism and mysticism, and I have never got to have even the time to remember to call Swami Paramarthananda to clarify this point, because we have three bodies and we experience three states. And how about experience these the locus, the three states we experience, but only one allows us to draw or to gain wisdom and knowledge, which is the Jiva Atma in a state of the awakening state, using the physical medium to experience the physical world. And through this interaction, we gain knowledge and wisdom. Okay. So, whereas in the dream state, we are experiencing something, but there is no question of gaining knowledge in there. And not to say about the deep sleep, in which there is no duality, knower and object of knowledge. And then again, there is no any knowledge we gain from these two other states, the deep sleep and the dream, we may gain, but in retrospective, when we come back to become again the awaker, and then we can draw some conclusion about the deep sleep with the help of the scriptures, and we can draw some conclusions as we remember some of those projections during the dream state. One of these days, I'm going to get myself together. Now it's I have been so busy with my land here. Mark promised me that he was coming to help. He did not. And then Claude also said, oh, yes, if Mark goes, I go as well. And here I am with a lot of projects and having to work hard. And then having my son in Brazil. But one of these days, I will manage to talk to Swami Paramarthananda to ask, what is this business of these 7 lokas above and 6 lokas below, and which way Jiva Atmas can experience there and gain knowledge, okay? Or if that is not really possible, whatever. Even though not necessary for the flow of discussion, the author talked about the relationship of the mind with the body, the Chidabhasa, and the Chit or Sakshi. The mind, the body-mind relationship, physical body and subtle body, is maintained by karma, especially Prarabdha karma. We saw it extensively already. And so this is a summary again. Even during the dissolution of the universe, the mind survives it in its seed potential form. The Chidabhasa, the reflect consciousness, will be present there in potential form. There is a dissolution of the mind. Oh, this is another hint here, okay? But this is about the dissolution of the universe. When the mind is not there because of the dissolution, it's the Chidabhasa remains in its potential form. The relationship between the subtle body, the Chidabhasa or the subtle body and consciousness is non-existent, okay? Which is a delusional relationship. The relationship between the mind and Chidabhasa is possible because both belong to the empirical reality, okay? So as we know, the subtle body and the reflect consciousness, they both belong to the same order, and then there is a relationship that is almost eternal, but with Videhamukta, with moksha. And then the reflect consciousness says, okay, but I don't need you anymore, reflecting medium, and I don't need you anymore, the physical medium, to gain more experience and so on. I'm out of here. And then the relationship is destroyed in that sense. This is adhyasa, the relationship between consciousness and the mind. It's possible only as a delusional relationship. This is called adhyasana. Shankaracharya in Adhyasha Bhashya, his introduction of Brahma Sutra discusses adhyasa using the example of the rope snake. The rope, snake. When someone says, this is a snake, on looking at the rope in dim light, this is a snake. This refers to a rope, and snake refers to something that is not there, and so is false. So when we look at a rope, but we see the snake, and it is in twilight, okay? There is a little bit of darkness, a little bit of light. When we see this is a rope, this is a snake, this refers to what? This refers to the rope. And the snake, this is a snake, and snakes refers to something that is not really there. It's a superimposition, as we say, okay? It's a dhyasa, and it's a projection. The real rope and the false snake can never have a connection. Is there a real connection? No. But yet, they seem to appear simultaneously. When we make this mistake, we bring about these two realities, a rope and a snake simultaneously. They exist there because one is real and the other is a superimposition. So it's not real, but it's there every time we are confused. Now, what is the relationship between the snake and the rope? So let's say what Shankaracharya says here. They can never be connected. The real and the real can never have any connection, but will still make a statement in which the real and the real are mixed up. So again and again in the text we say, so the real and the real got mixed up. The snake and the rope got mixed up. The light and the hand got mixed up to the extent that we believe that the light may be coming out of my hand. Consciousness is coming out of my physical body, and so on. So there is never a real connection there, but the scriptures again and again says that, okay, there is a mistaken connection here that needs to be undone, needs to be solved. So, but there is no real connection in which the real and the real mix up. There is no mixing up. Mixing the non-mixable is confusion. Mixing the non-mixable, you cannot mix the snake with the rope. But somehow Maya produced this phenomenon. We mix ourselves. We mix the body and the mind with consciousness. But do they really get mixed up? No, they don't get mixed up, except in our minds. Why? Superimposition. We are superimpose the body-mind complex on the I, on the self, on consciousness, right? Similarly, the I referring to the real I, the absolute, free, limitless Satchitananda, the truth, in the mind and the sense organs, which is the empirical truth, should never be connected, should never be seen as connected, as interdependent or anything. But I make that connection when I say I am born. When I say I am born, I in my conscious existence, I say I have a birth date. And then I am doing this connection. It's a real connection, imaginary connection, but this is due to ignorance. And how about this one? Oh, I'm growing old. This is a concern of most people. Oh my God, I'm growing old. I mean, again, I'm mixing up things here and things that are not mixable. That's the most funny thing. If they would be mixable, and then I say, okay, and then it's okay. There are two options. I either mix those two ingredients or I don't mix those two ingredients. It's like water and oil. They never really mix. But there are some others, sugar and water. I can mix them and then they are going to be properly mixed. Okay, but how about mixing that which is not mixable? And then it says here, this is all based on adhyasa. This connection based on confusion will continue as long as the confusion continues. So there is a connection, no, but there is a mistaken connection that will persist as long as adhyasa is intact. Until the moment that confusion is undone, removed, the absolute seer will be identified with a non-connection, with the non-connection with the relative seers. So that you have to understand the absolute nature of the I and identify it as something that has no connection with the other aspects of the I, the relative seers, the mind, the sense organs, and the sense instruments. This is a clear understanding of the whole chain by which consciousness is transferred to the world of experience. Thus, the Jnani, by this understanding clear, can say that he does not have likes, dislikes, pride, jealous, etc. And the Jnani can claim that he is the limitless free consciousness. When the mind is thus disconnected, the mind does not give any problems anymore. When the mind is no longer attached to the self, believing it is the self, the mind takes its proper place. It remains as an instrument of knowledge experience, and it's not giving any problem. Why? Because the mind was purified by the fire of self-knowledge. Once we know that, we remove projection and avarana, vikship avarana, the mind is no longer under the spell of ignorance. The mind knows my true nature is not the instrument, but it is the consciousness that enlivens this instrument. Okay, therefore I stick to my true identity nature, and then the mind is at ease because all those desires and aversions and vasanas, they begin drying out or melting away. Only when there is this connection, is impossible. Yeah? This connection, which is not really a connection, yeah? Because they are not connectable, they are not mixable. So even though it's not so, ignorance may make this projection. Yeah? Only when the connection, this confusion with the mind is created, the mind becomes problematic. Isn't it strange? If the mind is taken to be the self, it becomes problematic. Right? Why? Because it established its identity on something that is very shaky. It's very insecure. It's very limited. Once the mind takes itself to be the self, it is trouble. It's a troubled mind. Once the mind, and this is important, once the mind claims its true nature, and then the mind remains, the mind does not get killed, the mind remains, but a properly educated mind, and then it's no longer a troubled mind, okay? Because understood that the mind is in reality not the mind, but it is consciousness in its true nature. And this trouble given by the mind due to this impossible connection or this imaginary connection is what we call samsara. Okay, samsara is this misidentification with those relative seers in a way that the mind becomes troubled, the intellect, the subtle body, and so on, the ego becomes all troubled by this erroneous identification. And then the individual is going to experience what? A lot of negative feelings and emotions and thoughts, which comes from this sense of limitation, incompletion, and because I'm the body mind, I did not claim my true identity. This is samsara. The author will discuss this in detail later. Okay, and that takes us to the verse 10. Let's take a quick look here. It's a small one here. And oh, where am I? What is my text? Let me get it. Thanks to Claudio, I don't need to learn Sanskrit. Where is Claudio? So it says that the body also becomes unconscious in deep sleep when the ego is in absorption. The half manifestation of the ego, the half manifestation of the ego is dream, and its full manifestation is the waking. Interesting. We know that the body becomes totally unconscious in deep sleep, because the ahamkara, the reflect consciousness, the ego, is suppressed or is in absorption, in deep sleep or in Vikalpa Samadhi. So the body mind becomes unconscious. The half manifestation of the ego is dream. It's putting the dream world as half of the manifestation of the ahamkara. So we have the ahamkara. So the ahamkara is the I, and in dream state it manifests itself, and here it's presented as the half manifestation occurs in the dream. So in the dream world, the ahamkara shows up with its inner projection, and the full manifestation occurs in the awakening. And it's interesting to see that in the awakened state we are experiencing both things. We experience the Vyavaharika and the Pratibhasika. In the awakened state, we experience the physical material universe, and we experience as well our superimpositions or projections of the way we see and interpret the world. So we mix, okay? So our experience in the awakened state is a full manifestation, okay, of the ahamkara. And it manifests as the awaker and the dreamer, because we know that we are also daydreamers, right? We dream while awake. So let's say what Swampi brings to us here. Now the author talks about the function of seer 2, the mind, the ahamkara, in a little more detail. The mind has three states, the experience called avastha traya, so three states. When the mind is totally passive, it is in deep sleep, susupti avastha. When the mind is partially active, when the mind, meaning to say that the mind does not use the sense organs, but use the sense instruments. The mind does not use the sense organs. It is in svapana avastha, which is the dream state. Let me understand better this passage here. When the mind is partially active in dream state, the mind does not use the sense organs, okay? It is in svapana avastha, which is the state of dream. In this state, based on past experience, the mind projects an inner world called dream, for which the sense organs are not required. This is I was hesitating in saying anything about that, because when we have an experience in dream state, we hear, we see, we taste, we touch. Everything happens in deep state. We have sensations, which gives me the impression that in the dream state, we do not have the sense instruments of experience, but we have the organs of experience. But here the author is saying that no, in the dream state, no, the mind projects its inner, which is the dream, in which the sense organs are not required. Okay, interesting statement. Another thing that I have to make a note to ask Swami P, but a lot of the time these doubts and questions, they get clarified when Lynn talk to me.
Well, I think that I had a problem with this too, thinking about this. It says the mind does not use the sense organs. So maybe it's not that they aren't enlivened, but that they're not used to go out toward the sense instruments and experience the world. Because that word use,
yeah, but
maybe read into it, but
we could also say that the mind goes towards the subtle objects in the dream world, the subtle world. Yeah. So
yeah,
it would be a counter argument to what you were saying, you know, because we know that there are objects in the dream state, and we know that we perceive them. So, but here the Swami is saying that it is an inner projection. It projects itself, the contents of one's vasanas or impressions, projects themselves, and there is no experience entity. We hear again and again that there is an experience entity called the Taijasa, which experiences the subtle world of subtle objects. So that's why it's a bit intriguing to me, but maybe it's going to get clarified as we contemplate a little bit more, and maybe next week we get some more light into this. Let me read a little bit more here to see if it clicks. The mind is active enough to project an inner world, but not active enough to make use of the sense organs. Okay, so the mind is active enough, it projects the inner world, but not active enough to make use of the sense organs. In this state, the mind does not contact the external world, that's clear. The dream world has sufficient reality to disturb the mind. So, and then it means to say the mind is an experience agent, and the mind is an entity that is somehow experienced the subtle object through somewhat I always took to be the sense organs. The sense organs, which is different from the sense physical instrument. Okay. See, here it says, in this state, the mind does not contact the external world. The dream world has sufficient reality to disturb the mind. The mind is partially active. The mind is partially active with the vasana part of itself. So it's the impressions there in the mind, and it is just projecting itself, shining itself, and then, but it says that the mind gets even disturbed, but the mind does not make any use of the sense organs. So when the mind becomes fully operational and active during using the sense organs, the seer too, thank the support of the seer, the mind does not experience the internal world, but experience the external world. But for that, the mind needs the sense instruments as well. Unless, what's happening here is that because you see, in this Drg Drsya-Viveka, I tend to extend this chain of transfer to the physical body, to the Golapan, to the physical instruments, okay? And I extend to the other side from the mind, which is the thought, feeling aspect, to the intellect. But here it's presented as three seers. Most probably, the sense organs here refers to the sense instruments, okay? Because if we replace that, we say the mind is active enough to project the inner world, but not active enough to make use of the sense instruments. In this state, the mind does not contact the external world. The dream world has sufficient reality to disturb the mind. The mind is especially active with its vasana contents only. When the mind becomes fully operational and active, using the sense instruments, okay, and then the seer too, taking the support of the C1, experience does not experience the internal world, but becomes the Vishwa, the one experience the outer world, okay, the external world. It's just a question of denomination. This the sense organs, it refers to the sense instruments of experience, okay? It extends as the sense organs and the sense instruments. Now, I'm sure that that's what it is. In this, because in the entire Drg Drsya, this distinction, this separation, except in the paragraph we have read today, in which that the sense organs extends itself even to the sense instruments, huh? But in general, it stops at the sense organ by which we experience the physical world, the external world. Okay. Okie dokie. So we begin from the verse 10. I'm making my note here. Next Thursday. And we meet again next Monday. Anything for you? And then we mix next Monday. Ishvara willing. Namaste. Love you. And what you say? Arrivederci. And goodbye. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my friends, again. See you next.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Ciao.
Are you still there? Is Claudia still with Mark?
No, Claudio's gone, but I'm still here. Yeah.